7. Right, good morning everybody, and a very warm welcome to this final council meeting of the triennium. Welcome to members of the public, media, councillors and staff. Thank you very much for joining us, and joining us online we've got Councillor Thompson and independent member of PAR, Simon Neal. So welcome. Do we have any apologies? There are none. Any declarations of interest? Deputy Mayor Tavendale.
Agenda item 6.1 for the event centre. I'll stay in the chamber to ask any questions, but I won't vote on that. And agenda item 9.2 that I'll leave the chambers for the discussion. Thank you.
6.4 was the first one, is it?
6.1.
6.1.
Sorry, 6.4. It was 6.4.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? No, it's fine. Okay. No members for public forum. Moving on to confirmation of previous minutes. So we've got 4 sets there, so we'll just work our way through those. So first of all, the minutes for the council meeting on the 28th of June. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, remember the Congress small correction on page 9, very last line on that page. Another elected member noted that the community seemed to expect that was clear roads and footpaths. I think the word council needs to be added there. Note that the community seemed to expect that council would clear roads and footpaths. With that very small correction, I think we will.
Okay. Thank you. And seconded, Deputy Tavendale. Anything else? Okay, put it. Those in favour say aye. And against, that's carried. Next is the on page 7, the minutes from 23rd of August. That's Hopkins again.
Again, I'll move confirmation with two corrections, both as well on page 19. Under 4.3.
These go through to page
19.
That will be on the next set of minutes.
Oh, yeah, well, I'll be on to those now.
So we're on the 23rd of August, page 7, which goes through, I believe, to 15. I'm just looking off the agenda list here at the moment.
Just to get clarification.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor Kircher, I think Councillor Hopkins, the minutes we're doing first, the ones that were sent out this morning in a separate notice, not the ones. If you refer back to page 4.1,
sorry.
Yeah, back to 4.1, you'll note there, note the public minutes will not able to be included. So I think you were jumping a set ahead.
Okay. So we're just going back to the first set.
Yes.
Which were sent in a separate email.
They were an addendum to the agenda which came through overnight.
Yeah. Just yeah.
23rd of August, right?
So we're just actually just tracking back slightly to 28th of June first, I think, which was on the addendum. So make sure we're talking about the right ones.
Okay.
Nothing like a bit of confusion to end the year. The term. So going back to those, so Councillor Wolseley, are you happy to move those?
I'm happy to move that. The one that came here, the 28th of June, was a very big meeting, actually. So well done on recording those minutes.
Deputy Mayor seconded that still. That's June. Yep. Okay. And those in favour of the 28th of June ones, say aye.
Aye.
And against, carried. So 23rd of August now. So on page 7. Going through to page 15.
So that's the one.
Yes.
So that's the one about the clearing footpaths comment. Okay, so with that, you're moving those, Councillor Hopkins, and second.
Yep. Yeah,
Councillor Wolseley, thank you. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Back on track. Minutes from the 6th of September on page 16. Councillor Hopkins.
Again, I'll move, but with corrections on page 19 under item 4.3, 1, 2, 3, 5th paragraph. the suggestion of adding the words "and agreed" should be added. And I think words should be added, should be deleted in fact, so it would read the suggestion of adding the words "and agreed" after as appropriate.
Mhm.
And further, bottom second to last line, the earlier reference to stewardship during earlier discussion, and I would suggest that we delete the first earlier, so it would read the reference to stewardship during earlier discussion was reinforced. So those two more changes I have been worked on.
Continue my copy.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
That wouldn't have been heard.
no, that's fine. So just a couple of minor corrections there. So seconded by Councillor Tavendale, thank you. Those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. And then on to the 20th of September, page 26. Councillor Wallstein, thank you. Councillor Halalali, thank you very much. Any further comments? Put it, those in favour, please say aye. And against, that's carried. Okay, moving on to item 5.1, which is my report. Just get through to that. As always taken as read, but this one was not quite as full as a normal one, but just wanted to acknowledge some of the events and so on that have happened over the last 3 years. Just acknowledging some of that. Some of the challenges we've had and still have with reform and the ongoing work that we are doing to be better governors and for council to be a better organisation. Noting the departure of 2 councillors along the way in a by-election, the challenges of dealing with COVID lockdowns, all of the different things that have happened, but also some of the real areas where we've made progress in over that time. Just acknowledging the couple of memorial services, the one for Waitaki and also the state one that we had. And sorry, working my way through here. Talked a little bit around the committee structure for next term, what we've been trialling, and just keen to get more feedback from everyone on that in due course, whether it's now or later today. And then just finishing on, well, I'll finish on just our retiring councillors. So to those who have chosen to retire, Deputy Mayor Tavendale, Councillor King and Councillor Wallstein, just want to thank you publicly for your service. It's been for all of you, not only have you all served 3 terms, you've all been chairs of our main committees, you have been part of the exec committee, you've made a significant contribution, and you are a core part of the team that we have around this table today and for the last 3 terms. So thank you very much for everything that you have done. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit sad that you're leaving us, but equally, you know, we're very thankful for the service that you've given. So we'll be hearing more from you all shortly with valedictory speeches later this morning. And to our whole team, I do want to thank you very much for all the service that you have given, and the difficult times we've all gone through over the last 3 years, the challenges we've had, but also the good times, the feeling of unity that we actually have, and the real collegiality, and that, I think that was pretty well demonstrated on Sunday as we went to dedicate the shelter and picnic table in Ross McRoby's memory. And we're sorry that you couldn't be there, Councillor Hopkins, due to illness, but good to have you with us today. So it was, that was just a really cool thing to be able to look around and say, well, here's a real team that we've been working with for 3 years. So it's been good. So thank you all for your contributions over that time. So that's about it from me. But happy to take any questions or comments. Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, could I comment, please, on, well, firstly on the number of things you've done again. It's quite an extensive list there, well and truly. But the podcast, and I asked questions last time, and I've actually sat down there and listened to a few of those, and what a refreshing, positive listen they are, and much better than so much of the other media platforms of negativity that there seems to be just now. So I just commend it, and congratulate you and Damien for doing them. They're really good, positive records.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I put them in originally, the first ones, just so you had an idea of what we're doing. I thought, well, it's actually quite handy. It's not strictly mayoral duties, but it's quite handy for people to see who we are talking to, and yeah, it's just an opportunity to celebrate, a lot of great people and who've contributed to the Waitaki district. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'd just like, you said very nice things about us, and thank you very much for that. And I acknowledge the fact that you've acknowledged the robustness and energy with which people have debated issues, and not necessarily always agreed, but never descended into animosity or hostility retrospectively, which isn't unfortunately true of a lot of councils. But I'd just like to thank you for your leadership. You've said very positive things about us, and I think it's fair and appropriate that we acknowledge that you've led a team. You've managed differences. You've ensured that they haven't become festering sores, if you like, or issues beyond the moment or beyond the particularity of the case. So, thank you very much for your 3 years. Thank you.
Thanks for those kind words. Thank you. Okay, someone like to move to receive my report. Councillor Holding, thank you. Councillor Percival, thank you. No further comments. I'll put it. Those in favour say aye, and against, that is carried. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to item 6.1, endorsement of the draft annual report. So very much a draft at the moment, but Mr. Hope will welcome you to discuss this. I guess partly quick explanation of why we're getting this draft in the way it is, and what the process is from here. And just to also acknowledge Ian Wells, who's joining you there, and we've got Mandy McIntosh online as well.
Yeah, good morning. Usually this report is a bit more important as we present the draft annual report to the last meeting of the triennium, because usually the statutory reporting deadline requires that almost one of the first things the new council does is adopt an annual report over which they've really had no input and little comment on. However, with the revised statutory deadline that is now out to December, and the recent advice from Audit New Zealand that the audit of our annual report won't start until January or February of next year, the new council will have time to at least review the more finalised version of the annual report and be able to ask questions and gain a greater understanding of it before they are asked to adopt the final version. However, in spite of those changes and deadlines, the finance team have been very much working towards getting it as complete as possible to present, in terms of the operating result, pretty much a final picture for you to look at and consider at the end of the year. The big changes that we are expecting will all be just really in the space of adjustment of asset values, which do have a disproportionate impact just because of the size of the asset base that council is responsible for. So even a 1 or 2% change in asset value has a really dramatic impact on any surplus or deficit that we report to the year. Final result for the year, but really doesn't change too much on the operating impacts or of the overall funding that is required from council. So yeah, there are still some key pieces to be finalised, but really most of the hard work has been done by Mr. Wells and the rest of the finance team. I think it's well described, and I think we've made a real effort to keep council informed of the variations through the year, through the reports to the Performance Audit and Risk Committee. And so there really shouldn't be any surprises in terms of some of the operating variances that we're seeing. So as Mr. Wells put in the report, still does reflect a very strong financial position. There have been quite a number of variances, but we are operating in a less certain environment, both with sort of income coming in from the Crown, the amount of reform that we're having to respond to, and with this one, with the arrival of a new chief executive and the putting forward of some initiatives as part of, I suppose, Mr. Palmley making recommendations on how we need to transform the organisation, and that being supported by yourselves. So there have been some unbudgeted costs that overall still have a pretty limited impact on the overall financial position of council. So very happy to answer questions before we endorse this draft.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, questions? Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Mayor Kitcher. Not so much a question, but just echoing everyone's comments earlier about the team. This is always a good reflection on the annual report of what has been achieved over the year. So I'll just thanks to Alex and his team for the work that they have achieved this year, and look exciting. Looking forward to next year.
Thank you. Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, not so much a question either, like my colleague across the chamber, but just to acknowledge the amount of work you and your team have done to get the actual financial statements to this stage. They're a huge, for members of the public who might not realise, the financial statement draft annual report is 192 pages of a lot of detailed information. Some of it is already finalised, a lot of it is still to be finalised, but it's a huge undertaking. And but I'd like to comment also, it's a deficit for the year of 741,000, but that's after writing off 1.35 million in assets due to 3 water assets being abandoned. And also depreciation has been over budget by 1.135 million due to a revaluation of the 3 waters infrastructure. So when you take those 2 major write-offs into account, a deficit of 741k is a very good result for the year. So I think this backs up what Mr. Hope said. The council's has done very well in a strong financial position.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I have a question and a comment, if you'll allow, and I'm not quite sure whether the comment goes to Alex or to you, Paul, but I noticed on page 53, increased finance cost 117k over budget due to increasing interest rates charged on borrowing from the LGFA. Now, obviously that's happened, so we can't change that. But in my view, that should not just happen. And in fact, I would have thought it should be possible for us to say, this will be our borrowing for the year. At, say, beginning of a 12-month period, we intend to borrow X. If we exceed that, it will have to be by resolution. In other words, not just, our interest charges are 117,000 over budget, just because they are, but because we have resolved that it will be okay for them to be. In other words, what I'm suggesting is that as of now, we make it a matter of policy that any increases in finance costs like that would be determined by resolution, not just retrospectively advised. What, do you have a comment on that?
Pretty much all of the major matters that have led to that increase in borrowing have been through council resolutions. Because it is, the funding from the LGFA is really just required to fund decisions that council makes. So, items like undertaking the tranche one funding, even though that was funded by the Crown, we still had to fund it in the interim. Some additional investment into the infrastructure, council also made that decision, to bring some matters forward because it was more cost effective to do so. And council also, extended the borrowing, our investments in other organisations, which we were relying on to reduce the amount of borrowing that external borrowing required. So that in particular to Observatory Village and to the hospital. Now I think in the reports, we did note that this would have an impact on our cash flow and therefore an impact on the amount of external cost we had to bear. But pretty much all of those items have been offset by additional interest income coming on those in those investments. So I understand the sentiment, and I think we have reported on it, but I think it's getting that balance right. These were all decisions that have gone through council, and the decision has been made. And I think we did highlight that these would have an impact on our external borrowing requirements. We weren't then particularly explicit about the absolute dollar amount impact that would have. But we'll take a note of that, and whether we need to be slightly more explicit in the reports going forward. But I think you can take comfort that pretty much all of that it's just a direct reflection of a number of council decisions that have been made. Just to, as I said, we're operating in a far more uncertain and sort of volatile environment than probably local government has experienced, almost in all my time in it, which is now sort of over 20 odd years. It's just where we are.
Yeah, look, what I'd say, the item you've picked up is actually due to interest rate fluctuations, which interest's gone up. But equally on the positive side, we've got interest incomes over budget because, for like the buying out the loan at the retirement village, we had to borrow the money to do that, and we're getting charged interest, but we're actually getting paid more interest than that. So it ends up being positive for the ratepayers. And so, there's, but as Paul says, we need to be very clear. They have not borrowed more than anything that we've, for anything that we've haven't agreed to. It has been agreed along the way. Mr. Palmley, and then Colin.
Mine was very brief. Really, it builds on what Paul was saying. As a takeaway, we'll have a look at the, what we put in terms of financial impact of decisions, so that we can make sure it's absolutely transparent what the financial impact of decisions is. Maybe it makes sense to us from officers' point of view, but we can test out, for the next triennium, some approach to ensuring that it's absolutely clear to elected members what the borrowing impact is of decisions.
I'd be happy with that, and even just the kind of strategic identification that these changes would have an impact. But no, that's fine. Can I just my other question, if I may, through you, Mayor Kircher, on page 78, we're looking at debt control, and this benchmark reports council's actual debt. Now I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing 143.5 and 114.6, and I know that at least one resident and ratepayer has raised this issue of debt. To what extent, given that the graph on page 78 shows that we've not achieved our benchmarks, to what extent should people be concerned about that, those debt figures?
No, I don't. We've also had that same question from a member of the public, and have acknowledged back to that person that they have found an inconsistency in the long-term plan between where we changed, adjusted one measure, but didn't reflect that fully in another couple of places of the document. So we will correct that in the next version. In terms of compliance, I think for the reasons we've outlined, there is no cause for concern from the public. Yes, we are borrowing a bit more, but I think for very good reasons, and all of those reasons, as Eva said, have passed through council. And just again emphasising the point that Mr. Palmer made, you would need to maybe make the transparency of the overall impact a little clearer. But there's certainly we're still nowhere. We're not a heavily indebted council, and we can certainly still easily support the service and costs that we're incurring.
Thank you.
And I know there's a lot of misinformation being spread about massive debt. There is not massive debt, and we have more than that in reserves actually invested out in the community. So, you know, we are, compared to most councils, we are in a very, very solid position, and there's a lot of ability. But we are doing a lot of infrastructure work. We will have debt funding that because it has to be done, and the only other way to do it is you either wait until we do collect up enough money, and that could be 5 or 10 years in the future, or else you get on and do it, and you rate for the whole cost in 1 year, and that's just not affordable for people. So, you know, this is where debt used well is good, and make sure that when things get done by the deadlines that many of them need to be done. We'll go to Councillor Wallstein, then Councillor Percival, and then Councillor Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Just a comment and a question also regarding the interest received and paid by council. I think just to follow up your comments, Mr. Hope, some of the extra interest paid on the LGFA borrowing would be on amounts borrowed that have been rolled over and renewed at a higher rate than what the original borrowing rate was. So it's just a fact that the official cash rate has risen markedly in the meantime. Interest rates are rising, and that cost of council to council on that money borrowed has risen on renewal. But secondly, just Mr. Wells, you stated about interest income is reported over budget. You didn't give us a figure. Any indication as to how much over budget the interest received by council last year was? You told us it was 117 over budget on the cost, but how about the income? Thank you.
If you go through the annual report copy that's as part of the agenda, you'll find note 4, I think, is regarding interest, and that will show that it's something like twice budget, but that's just off the top of my head. It's very healthily better than budget.
Thank you.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, Paul, just a matter of interest. If we've got all our ducks in a row, what effect can Audit New Zealand have on the final report?
The areas where we have probably the greatest level of disagreement with audit is in probably the asset revaluation and fair value assessment of assets, and that is just a matter of professional judgment. And as I said earlier, it's where a small adjustment in terms of percentage wise can have a significant dollar impact compared to a lot of the other, essentially the revenue and costs that would vary. So what we are planning to do is finalise the last parts of this, forward it to Audit New Zealand, clearly state our assumptions that we've made so that we can have a early discussion about the items where there has been previous disagreement. So really we can probably come back to council and say, this is almost the officer point of view, this is the auditor's point of view. What position does council want to take? Potentially, is it, it might have an impact on the audit opinion. But I think, council, these are council's financial statements. We should be making the decisions about what is presented to the public, not being completely driven by the auditors. And I think as long as we're clear about what the variance is and the potential impact, and then council can make a proactive decision about, well, no, we're happy to go with this and potentially live with a adverse comment in the audit opinion, or would rather take another position to reduce that adverse comment. But the audit opinions have evolved significantly over where they used to be, where it was very much a ticker across. Now there is far more commentary in that opinion, really about the auditors giving a point of view on multiple aspects of the report. So again, it's to inform the public. But yeah, it would be good to make active decisions about that. So that's why we'll continue really with this earlier time frame and really present something back to the new council. So it's very clear about the areas where we are having disputes with audit, or disagreements with audit, and a way to resolve this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely times when the audit opinions are really valuable and actually help add transparency, and then there's other times where actually it clouds the issue, and the inclusion of the retirement village is one of those where we have to include it and actually provides less transparency because of that. So it is trying to make sure that we making the right decisions and things are as clear as possible for the community for those who want to look at it, to be able to look at it and see where things actually are. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comment on page 55 under financial considerations. It talks about our financial position remaining what is and remains sound, and we've got ready access to funds, etc. And that our rate increases that we implemented for both the 2022 and 23 years have seen its position improve further. I'm just wondering whether we do or we should take our financial position into account when we are looking at setting rates, because in effect, this is sort of, it's written like that we didn't necessarily need to increase the rates the way we did. And potentially, if we take that into account, we're not here to make money from rates. So it's just something to sort of think about in the future, going forward.
Yes. Well, I think the three water reforms are going to, looking at the potential impact, I think council will be faced with some real choices about particularly the water and sewer charges that they want to charge to the community with a view to what might be happening to the future. So that will in particular be an item that I think will be actively discussed as we set the next annual plan. And then really what happens, what the organisation looks like if the reforms go through as they are put forward at the moment, will mean quite a change to the financial structure of council, and we'll really need to consider items like that as we formulate the next long-term plan. So I think it is, it shouldn't just be a single year view. That there are some options in there in terms of what is good for, what is best for the long-term future of council and the long-term future of the community.
Thank you. Anything else? Someone like to move the recommendations? Councillor Holding, Councillor Percival. Any further comments? Put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against. That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to, well, thank you, Mr. Hope and Mr. Wells and team. 192 pages of work that, all the best for the finalising of that and working with the audit team. Right, on to 6.2, approval of the Dog Controls Act Section 10A report, eagerly awaited report every year. So we can see, I did hear on the radio this morning, there was one councillor who was taking note of most popular dog names, and I think there was over 1,000 dogs in their district called Bella, and there was another name, I didn't catch what that was, but I don't think our report goes into that detail. Do you want it to? No, we don't want it to. Anyway, now you're settled in, Mr. Cook and Mr. Hope, so welcome. Sorry, page 249. 50. Yeah. So, Mr. Cook, when you're ready, you go for it.
Good morning. Thank you very much, everybody. As you rightly point out, the report doesn't contain the most popular dog name in Waitaki, but it does report that there is an increase in dogs and it reached a grand total of 5,694. And I'm very pleased that we've got Mr. Hope, Senior Compliance Officer here, who will take us through the report and any questions you have.
Yeah, thanks very much for receiving the report. There's a few things I'd like to draw your attention to, if I may. On page 251 of the report, paragraph 3, under part 1. It was quite a challenging year this year. At the beginning of the year, we did have struggle to recruit a person to fill a vacant position. It was vacant for some time, so it is quite a unique role, the animal management position. Does come with some unique challenges, and we do need people with quite a diverse skill set. Quite difficult to recruit someone, but I don't think we're alone in finding someone, suitable candidates. Page 252.
I just think, so that's the number on the bottom of the
that's
page.
correct, yes.
Yeah, we just got a different number on our convene document, so it's the printed number on the page.
That's correct. Paragraph 5 on page 252. We talk about here increasing the numbers of dogs that are classified as menacing, and also the number of disqualified or probationary owners. It's important to note that whilst we've increased those actions, we haven't actually had any requests for hearings in front of council. And we also haven't had any appeals made in respect of disqualifications or probationary ownership notices. I'd like to think that reflects the fact that we take an evidence-based approach to what we do. The decisions that we're making are reasonable and proportionate. And I do think that means that people accept the position that they're in. And it's a case for us to go and monitor compliance with those orders or those notices.
Excuse me, just to make sure people can hear well enough, can you just move that, yeah, just angle it to whoever's speaking. Thanks very much.
Thank you. On page 253, we talk about our partnerships with community organisations. These really do help propel us forward in terms of the services that we can provide. We can refer people to different organisations when we can establish a need. Some examples of that are that when we found people are perhaps in extreme hardship, we've been able to refer them to the SPCA, where they've been able to de-sex their dogs, generally for free. So that's really important. Also our rehoming options. We have very few dogs that are euthanized. The vast majority of our dogs are rehomed. On page 255, in respect to the registration fees, you'll see there's a note at the top that records we have not, the fees have remained unchanged since 2015. That's something we're very conscious of, and we need to consider whether or not that's sustainable. So we'll be investigating that this year. In comparison to other councils or 5 neighbouring councils, on average, our registration fees are between 17% and 32% below the average currently. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
No, I guess that'll come through in the annual plan discussions as to looking at, where is the overall funding sitting? Are we covering the costs, and making sure that we're looking after things that way. Right, any questions? Councillors, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. Just apropos of that last matter, last time I recall this, and it's been a while, but I had a feeling that our the fees, that account was actually in credit. And if it is, then it's great that we're cheaper than other people and we should stay that way and tell people. So am I right in assuming that the account actually is in credit or not?
I'm not entirely sure of the financial position.
I just need to put your mic on.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure of the financial position.
No one else? That's all I'd like to move. We adopt that report. Premier Tamandale and seconded Councillor Kingan. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that is carried. Item 6.3 St John grant request on page 259 is next. So thank you, Mr Cook and Mr Tristan Hope and Mr Paul Hope. Welcome back. So we've had a request from St John. I just want to remind councillors that when turning down their requests to use part of Armagh Park, there was a resolution that council would assist St John with a new site if possible. So in response to that, they've sent this letter requesting that we waive or cover in some other way some of the costs of around resource consents and development contributions and so forth. So Mr Hope, pass over to you to introduce the report.
Yeah, so sorry, this is a relatively simple report, really just reflecting the request from St John's. I know that we'll work with St John's to try and minimise the fees, to really maximise the opportunities that are available in policies to do that in a way that's fair and reasonable for both the applicant and the wider community. We believe that there's some opportunities to do that. I think Mr Cook and the building team have indicated, particularly the number of inspections that may be required. If that's well planned, then that's a cost that can be minimised. Also, once the design is a bit further along, some of them will certainly clarify the amount required from development contributions. That's really why we're recommending a sort of a capped dollar amount rather than the very specific amount that St John's included. In terms of funding this, we don't have a budget of this size to cover sort of the grants of these amounts. So that's an item that we'll just bring forward through the next annual plan as an item, because the reality is that it's more likely to have an impact in the next financial year rather than this financial year. So what we'll be really doing is making a commitment into the next annual plan as part of this decision. So happy to answer any questions.
If I can just go quickly to one, would it be possible just to basically have these costs sit where they fall? So within those funds, within those reserves and so forth. So rather than it needing to come back as a separate item in the annual plan.
It's actually a bit more complicated because the biggest ones are through the development contribution policy, where there really isn't too much of a grounds to just not charge them. I think for transparency purposes, we are better to charge them as we're required to under the policy. If there's a special assessment or anything else, then that would go through the development contributions policy to limit those. But the policy itself is it really is charge and then make a subsequent decision. So
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hopkins and Councillor.
Yeah, just look, a couple of questions. I would have thought some of these matters could be dealt with, for instance, the water development contributions could be dealt with an adjustment in the rate. Presumably they'll be metered, and I know we've done that in the past. We've actually recouped a DC through a moderated tube charge. I notice also that St John aren't necessarily asking for the whole 65. They do. Their letter says they are requesting a grant funding towards the 65,000. I would have thought equally there are things like deemed credits that could be taken into account here. I just think that given we don't have an identified source for the money, we want to do it, but I think we also would want to do it in a way that is least impactful. So I just think a little bit more thinking in terms of how we actually might fund some of these or offset some of these costs would be worth looking at before a final figure and implementation method is adopted.
There won't be any deemed credits because they're not demolishing any of their current building. They're vacating it, but the building stays there, and so the credits, basically the credit stays there. But Mr. Hope, you want to add further to that?
Yeah, that's correct. Look, as I said in the introduction, the council teams will work with St John's to minimise the charges that are chargeable under the policy. But the reality is, whether it's we don't collect the revenue or we recognise it as a grant, it has the same financial impact on council. So I think we'd better go for the more transparent process. So that it's a grant to a charitable organisation, and there's generally some positive impacts both in the reporting of that and potentially in terms of what we can do in relation to our tax return.
Deputy Mayor.
I totally agree with the simplicity and transparency. I guess my only question is, if we're looking at it coming to the next annual plan, what's to stop it being relitigated? Is this something that if we make a decision today, despite the fact we're not entirely sure where we're going to place it, that decision is made and we're not going to have the rug pulled out from under St John at a later date, because that would be a major concern to me.
I mean, this is a council decision, so by resolutions, I think it's pretty much an automatic item that just goes into the annual plan. It would be revoking a decision of a prior council. It's not sort of I suppose, a debatable item through the annual plan.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll move the recommendation, and Mayor Tamandale seconding that. And Councillor Percival, do you want to speak to that?
No.
Okay. All right. Any speakers to it?
Just quickly, I do think this is a really good way of doing it, and as much as I'd like to maximise how we help them as a group, I think just sticking it to the real costs is nice and transparent and makes it really clear. So really pleased they have come to us, and we've got a way that we can help enable their building.
Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, like Deputy Mayor Tapendale, I also congratulate St John on their and wish them all the best in their building. I think the location and situation they're building in now is far better than what Almar Park would ever have been. So it's been a bit of a troubled path, but to a far better end result. So I'm very pleased by that.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll just take a reply. And basically, this is something that's been worked on for a long time. It's through the generosity of a local family that they've got the land, and that's I'm sure appreciated by everybody concerned. I think if this is a one-off type situation, doesn't set any precedent for anyone else, but I think it's a very tangible way that we can show our support for the work that St John does, and make sure that they can get on and build their building sooner rather than later. There's a lot of local fundraising that has happened and will have to happen. But yeah, I look forward to them having a new facility which is going to work for them much better than what it currently does. So nothing else. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. And against. That is carried. Thank you very much. Right, item 6.5, interregnum period delegation to the chief executive to do any 6.4, sorry. I'd tick the wrong one. Waitaki Event Centre Project Board representation. So welcome, Mr. Van der Speck. Wonder why you're sitting there. So anyway, welcome. And if you'd like to speak to the report.
Thank you, Mayor Kitcher. At the last project board meeting from the Waitaki Event Centre, the project board made a couple of recommendations to council just to amend the representation of the project board. The first is that they would have recommended that we invite a representative from Network Waitaki to be on the project board. That's to acknowledge, I guess, the significant contribution that Network Waitaki are making towards the event centre and to make sure their interests are represented at that project board. The second is that for the duration that the elections and the new council are inaugurated are taking place, that Deputy Mayor Tavendale remain on the project board as the council's representative until new representation is appointed.
Thank you very much. And take it, Deputy Mayor, you're happy to do that. Thank you. Right. Any questions? Councillor Holding.
Just probably just a silly question, but do we need to do this prior to the election to keep Deputy Mayor on, or is it why not? Why have we done it? Once we can actually choose the new member, what was the rush for this meeting?
The rationale at the moment is that project board meetings occur as and when required. There is one in, I believe, 2 weeks' time. So it's just to ensure that there is continuity for council representation until somebody new is appointed. If somebody is appointed sooner, then there may not be a necessity for it, but it just gives us that assurance.
Okay. Right. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Wallstein and Councillor Williams seconded that. Any discussion? Pretty straightforward. It is just about providing some continuity until we, the new council decides what's on this and the various other roles. So I will put it, those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against. It's carried. Thank you, Mr. Van der Speck. And abstention by the Deputy Mayor Tavendale. Okay, now this time, item 6.5, the decision for the CE to do anything during the period between this council finishing and the new one starting. Not quite do everything, but Mr. Palmer, do you want to speak to this one with that introduction?
Yeah, great introduction. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So this is a standard item on most council agendas to cover the interregnum period. It's not a blank check, it's a check that's only to be cashed under certain circumstances and with some strict conditions attached to that. I think in past experiences, it's generally not used. But it just ensures that any essential functions of the council can be dealt with. Any decisions that need to be made to protect the council or community interests can be made during this interregnum period. But hopefully it's not a delegation that I need to draw on in the interregnum period.
Questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Just to, if you do sell everything,
I think that might be my passion.
might there be, I mean, you know, would you be contemplating a small celebration that would include us or?
No, I would just report it to the next council as required.
Anyway, okay. So do we have a movement?
No,
No.
thank you. Thank you.
Can recall quite where we're at. Councillor Hopkins and secondly Councillor Holding. Thank you. Right, those in favour say aye. Those against, it is carried. Thank you. We've only got one other public item, which is valedictory speeches by retiring elected members. We've got 20 minutes before the scheduled morning tea break. Just really would like to know whether those ones with those speeches want to make them, or start them before morning tea, and then carry on after that, or whether you'd rather wait. We could potentially go into public excluded and do the couple of small items in that, and then come back into public. So I'd like to do that. Okay, so you move.
I'll move again.
Okay, thank you. And seconded, Councillor Wolfstein, thank you. Those in favour, say aye. Against, it's carried. So thank you very much. Sorry for those who are watching and eagerly anticipating the speeches, and to the member of the public and media who are here. So we will be scheduling that to start at 10:30, and so if you are wanting to come back for that, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Even bad here, we weren't.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I just had one question going to, was it page 293 on the bottom of the page, the actual print page, not the convene page, the two page. The chart there shows organisation, it shows the IOD recommendation. And I know Tourism Waitaki is like probably maybe at the end of its life, but the recommendation for the chair of Tourism Waitaki was between 32 and 40, and the new increase is only just over 30,000. A director between 19 and 24, and we're 17.7. So we're well below. I know we always have been. And but is there any rationale? Well, so I say just the fact that it's may not last very long, but if it was to carry on, there's probably no rationale for it to be that far below IOD recommendation. Just to raise it for discussion.
We're not this one. Something's wrong here. Nope. Simon, we're just going to shut down the Zoom meeting. Are you okay with that?
I think it's gone bye-bye.